Good morning, guys. Happy Monday. Today we're going to start Mesopotamia. It's kind of a lot of information, so I kind of broke it up. So today we're going to do Mesopotamia. Tomorrow we'll do the Epic of Gilgamesh. And then Wednesday we'll talk about Sargon and Hammurabi and his code of law. And then, of course, Thursday we will start Egypt. Okay, so I'm just letting you know this is the Google Doc. There's the presentation link. For some reason, the videos aren't working, so I'm just going to add the videos there for those who want to watch them. And all you're doing is you're following along with the lecture, the presentation, and make sure you're paying attention to what you need to be filling in. Okay? It's not very long. So let's get started. Boom. All right. So this is just a song. And again, because I'm using a student Chromebook, it's not going to let me play the video, but I'll add the video into Google Classroom. So for those that want to listen to it can. So Mesopotamia, the location is what is today Iraq and Kuwait. So let's take a look at that. Well, first, right? It's the first civilization to emerge along rivers. So make sure you're writing that into your notes. There are pros and cons to this. Obviously, the pros, right, the good stuff, is that these conditions favored farming. Floodwater would spread this very nutritious silt onto the land, and it would provide nutrients for the crops. Very, very healthy for the crops, very good for the crops. It prevents the land from becoming dead, if you will. It also provides a regular supply of fresh water, right? They're going to start using water for a lot of things, mainly irrigation for crops, but also, drink to provide the animals with water, to clean themselves, right? So it's going to add to the sanitation of the civilization as well. And of course, it's going to provide transportation. They're not really building roads per se, but they're going to start using the waterways to kind of carry things up and down and to connect with other groups of people. And animals, they would be able to take them to the river. So it's a little bit easier. The downside, some of the cons they had to face is kind of unpredictable flooding. Sometimes they would know it was coming, sometimes they didn't. The flooding would cause a lot of people to die, a lot of destruction. And of course, over time, they learned how to deal with this. But initially, it caused a lot of damage and death. Water that had to be channeled, and this is supposed to be to irrigate. And so they started kind of digging into the earth and making these canals or basins, and eventually levees and dikes that where they were the ones in control of the water. But this cost a lot of manpower, right? This is not something, I'm going to knock out this channel, in an hour. I mean, this would take weeks and months and a lot of people to make sure that this got done. So cultural diffusion, which was kind of mentioned on Friday. So as people migrate, as they move around, they come in contact with other people. And most of the time, at least initially, these people are very different than them, okay? And they come in contact for several reasons, right? We have an economic system that's already begun to be set up. We have crops being grown. We have people making stuff. And so trade becomes kind of an important activity within the civilizations. And trade causes the introduction of new goods, right? If you travel to a new land and you see that they're using something that's better than what you have at home, right? Or they make something that's easier and cheaper and takes less time, you're going to start adopting that stuff into your culture. You're going to bring that stuff back home and say, listen, guys, I saw this tool that did this and it just made it so much easier. Or I saw, we can do this, this, and this, and it'll take us less time and we can get more done. And so just out of, sheer observation and connecting and kind of talking with different people, they kind of learn better different ways of doing things. And of course, warfare, anytime you get the population increasing, these civilizations are going to be fighting for resources and dominance and power. But warfare also had and has a tendency to bring about exchange of ideas and stuff. If you go into a neighboring empire and you kill some of the people, you might find a sword or a spear and you're like, wait a second, this is way better than what I have. Let me take this back home and maybe the swordsmith can replicate it, right? And so this happened all the time. So cultural diffusion is when you have contact and an exchange of ideas. So everybody probably recognizes this can, right? Coca-Cola, right? But we have Coca-Cola all over the world, right? All over the world, just like McDonald's. There are McDonald's literally all over the world. I know my husband, when he was stationed in Japan, he went to a McDonald's off base, and he said, the Big Mac meal was exactly how you see it on American TV. And of course, if you ever ordered a Big Mac in America, it looks nothing like you see on TV. But in other countries, they really try to make it how we're presenting it to the world. So exchange of ideas, right? Let's eat some crickets. Cultural diffusion. It happens all the time, whether we want it to or not. And sometimes we don't even know that it's happening. So the result of this is culture becomes imported. It becomes exported and mixed. It blends. There's fusions. Some of you might be, the result of cultural diffusion if you have two parents from very different backgrounds. My mother's family's from Mexico. My dad's family's from Germany. How these two people would have ever met and had 3 kids is beyond me, but it happens, right? And they're two very different cultures coming together. And you see that import, export, and mixed. Okay. So as people share and exchange ideas, they adopt customs and they incorporated pieces of other cultures into their own. Okay. The whole point of this is that culture is complex. It's never cut and dry, black and white. It's very complex. So Mesopotamia, it's the ancient fertile crescent. And it's crescent because it's like a moon shape. You see it? Or some students say it looks like a boomerang, but this is what it is here. Okay, fertile crescent. And in Mesopotamia, we have Mesopotamians, right? But we'll talk about the Sumerians, and the Akkadians, and you have the Assyrians and the Babylonians. All these people kind of originate from this area. So another thing that they call Mesopotamia is the cradle of civilization. Cradle implying a baby or the birth. And so they say, this is the first civilization. Mesopotamia itself, the word itself means country or land between 2 rivers. And we saw the 2 rivers. We reviewed that on Friday, but it's here, the Euphrates and the Tigris. Tigris and Euphrates. Remember I gave you MET, M-E-T, or E-M-T to remember that? And just, this is modern day Turkey, okay? Here's the Mediterranean, very important waterway. We're going to talk about that a lot this first semester. And here's Africa. So technically right here would be Egypt, which we're going to talk about at the end of the week. Just letting you know, but it's a part of Africa. And here's Saudi Arabia, or what they would call back then the Arabian Desert or the Arabian Peninsula. So roughly 6,000, 8,000 years ago, agriculture was well under its way in Mesopotamia. This is because the regular river floods made for fertile soil around the banks, and the rivers could also supply fresh water to irrigate crops. It's no coincidence that as agriculture allowed for denser and denser populations along more specialized society, some of the world's first civilizations developed. Okay, Mesopotamia is also at the crossroads of the Egyptians and the Indus Valley civilizations. They're like the in-between guys. And we know that they were exchanging with Indus Valley because whenever we excavate parts of, or whenever they did excavate parts of Mesopotamia, they found Indus coins there. And there's no reason for them to be there unless these people were buying and selling or exchanging stuff with the Mesopotamians. And of course, the Mesopotamians did a lot of business with the Egyptians. This made it a melting pot of languages and cultures that stimulated a lasting impact on writing, technology, language, trade, religion, and law. Okay? So now we get to the Sumerians. And we're just going to talk about the Sumerians today. All right. So the Sumerians, and here you have Sumer, So you have Uruk and Ur. These are where we're going to see the temples, and Nippur. Akkad is here, and Akkad is eventually going to extend all through here, but we're going to get to the Akkadians next time. So they emerge around 3000 BC. Their economy is primarily agriculture. They have a lot of metal working that they do. They make a lot of tools and weapons. And as time progresses, they get really, really good at this. We see a lot of pottery coming out of this area, and they're trading. They are traveling and they're trading with different people, okay, which is very good. So social hierarchy. What is a social hierarchy? I put this here, right? Other words for social hierarchy: power structure, food chain, social structure, dominance, order, position, scale, grouping. In other words, this is how we divide people up in a society. And there's different ways you can do that. You can divide people up based on the money they make, the intelligence level they have, their location, race and ethnicity, religion, political affiliations. There's a lot of different ways to divide people up, okay? But we're going to talk about how they divided people up back then. Okay, so here's this pyramid that I put here. They have a king at the very top, and it's more like what they call a priest king or a god king, okay? The priests are in charge of all the temples. There's a massive temple in each city-state. Religion is very important. King is at the top. They are thought to have been chosen by the gods. And then you have the scribes here. These are the people that record laws. They actually record anything. Okay, scribes record all kinds of stuff. And then I have this here because it's a bit mixed than what this pyramid is. But you have skilled craftspeople, merchants, and traders. And then around kind of midpoint here, you see a large working class of farmers and laborers. And then at the bottom, which you can't tell, which is slaves. Eventually, they're going to be about 90% slaves, and they're going to be getting their slaves through warfare. So invading the surrounding territories and taking people, okay, and putting them to work to build the empire. So government. They're kind of a mix between a monarchy in that they have kings, right? They have the title king, and theocracy. Theocracy is when you're ruled by divine right. So it's usually the religious entity that's in control, okay? So they're kind of mixing that. They had priest kings initially, okay? And then when competition became too much and there's a lot of death and destruction, then we get that the priest part gets kind of shifted off, and then they have kings. But initially, it's priest kings, okay? City-states are ruled by kings. So in this one, you might have several city-states, and each city-state would have a king, okay? Now, when you get to an empire, there's just one king over all of the cities, right? All the territories, one king. But city-states, it's broken up into pieces. And they're chosen by God, by the gods. These kings or priest kings would enforce laws. They would collect taxes, okay? They maintain the irrigation, whether that's building, commissioning the building of more canals or levees or whatever it is. And they kind of maintain that and make sure that it was operating and crops were being irrigated and whatnot. They also maintained the army, and they also acted as judges to dispute any disputes that would have among people. So there's no lawyers or anything, but it's the king that will listen to, the dispute or what happened between two groups of people or two people, and it was the king that decided the punishment or the payment or what was going to happen. So increased competition of resources like land and water leads to constant fighting. And of course, anytime there's constant fighting in an area, it's going to lead to changes. So religion. They're polytheistic. That means they have many gods. They have both male and female gods. And there's a god or goddess for everything. Their religion was to explain, one, the natural phenomenon that they were dealing with, so the unpredictable flooding, crop failures, droughts, whatever it was, there was an explanation, right? And it was attached to their religion, right? Their gods or goddesses. They would offer many animal sacrifices, right? And we're not talking about, just go and get a goat or whatever and kill it. It's like get the best of whatever livestock you have, and that's what's going to be sacrificed. They would also bring wine and food and fancy pottery and sculptures or statues or jewelry, any sort of handcrafted thing. It really depended on the god or goddess and kind of what that god and goddess wanted. And if they wanted, a bunch of meat and flowers, and that's what they would bring. Okay, so it just kind of depended on which ziggurat they were going to, which temple they were going to. So the gods were human-like, and this kind of made it easy for them to kind of accept this idea of god kings, right? Because they view their gods as like them, right? They're supernatural, obviously, and they have a lot of power and they can control everything. But they're kind of built in, they were made in the god and goddesses images, if you will. There's no separation of church and state. We have separation of church and state in the United States, but they didn't have a separation of this. It's a fusion. So the religion and the political entities are hand in hand, and they work together. And in many ways, they're kind of the same thing with these people. So here's just some of the gods. Ningal, right, in charge of metals. Saja, this is the messenger. Baal is storms, Dagon is wind, Nergal is death and pestilence or disease, Erishagal, this is death. Inanna, this is love and war. Tammuz, he's the shepherd and fertility. Anu is heaven. Marduk, right, is judgment and magic. So there's just a couple of them, and there's dozens and dozens of more. If you're interested, just kind of research, Mesopotamian gods and goddesses, and you'll find a bunch of websites, and they'll take you to, a huge list. So they did believe in an underworld or an afterlife, but to them, it's not a pleasant realm of existence. It's dark, it's dusty, the bread has no flavor. Their garments are only feathers to protect them from the cold, and water to drink is brackish. Brackish is, you would find brackish water in like estuaries. This is like where a river meets like an ocean, if you will. Okay, so the water is, it's kind of fresh water, kind of salt water. It's like a mix. So it's slightly salty. I guess you could drink it if you want to, but it's probably not the best for you. Okay. So it's the place where we live on dust. Their food is mud, and they see no light, living in blackness. This is from the Epic of Gilgamesh, which we'll talk about tomorrow. So to them, when you die, it doesn't matter if you're good or bad. There's no distinction between good or bad people. It's just when you die, there's just it's just darkness. It's like you're just kind of sitting in dirt, and food tastes like dirt, and you're surrounded by mud, and that's that. So it's not a very uplifting view of death or the afterlife, but that's just what they thought. Okay, that's just how they saw it. Okay, so a ziggurat, this is like their word for church or temple. Okay, they're located in each city-state. They're dedicated to a particular god or goddess. So each city-state would have, I guess, their god or goddess that represents that city. Okay. And so the ziggurat would be built, and they range in different sizes. Some of them are just massive, 7, 9 stories. It takes a long time to build these things, and it's mud brick and very elaborate. It is the most important building in each city, hands down. Okay. And they're believed to have served as a pedestal for the gods to descend to earth. So if this is Marduk's temple, for instance, and he decides to come down, right, and kind of hang out in his temple, he can do that at any time. And you better make sure you have the food that he likes and the wine that he likes and the fabric that he likes, and it better smell the way he wants it to smell. And so they would constantly, the priest every day would tend to the temple and make sure that it was fit for the god or goddess, just in case they came for a visit. Okay. There's a video I'm going to put in there. It's an interesting fact about the ziggurats. It's pretty cool. And this is in in Iraq. This is where the military base is. And it's a very short clip from the news, but I'll also put that on the list for you guys to watch. All right, cuneiform. We're almost done. Cuneiform is Sumerian writing. It's wedge-shaped, and they used it for record keeping and teaching. Okay, this is a scroll from one of the kings. Sorry. Okay. So it looks kind of cool. I don't know what it says. All right. So if you want, I don't know if you have Play-Doh at home. I did this last year where I gave students Play-Doh and they used like a pencil. Yeah, you could use like a pencil. But here are the letters. So if you want to write your name or write a message, here's some, symbols: eminence, divine light, freedom and liberty, love, brave hero, power and strength. So if you want, just kind of fiddle with this. It's not the easiest thing to do. Yeah, you see it's like a triangle shaped stylus down here is what they're using. But feel free, have fun with it. So their accomplishments. Sumerians developed many technologies that revolutionized society. They had impressive architecture, ziggurats, arches. They built homes. They had a way of making these massive clay bricks. They're not the first ones to do this, but or to kind of perfect this style, but it was very effective. Ineffective in the sense that they could build a lot of stuff fairly quickly. It wasn't the most durable, but hey, you got to start someplace. They're the first to use irrigation for crops. They will develop drainage ditches, canals, dikes, levees, and this helps them to control the water. Their metalwork, they did a lot of metalwork with bronze. They made a lot of tools and weapons, which you can see here, especially a lot of agriculture tools. They had potter's wheel. That's going to lead to a very rich development of a lot of different pottery. The water clock to tell time, the sail, the plow, and writing, and they use of silver for currency. So they develop their own kind of money system or currency system, which is cool because they're going to be dealing with the Indus and the Egyptian and other people, and so it's good that they kind of have value, right, for their stuff. So the Epic of Gilgamesh, I know, right? Super cool. We're going to get to this next time. Okay. So that's all I have for you today. I think I wanted to show you this, and I'll put this link in there. What is this? Close. This is not working. All right. So 9 Sumerian inventions, sorry. Yeah, this is not, I'm just going to put the link in there. Okay, so I don't want to take much more of your time. So thanks. We'll talk about the Epic of Gilgamesh tomorrow.